Okay, that was awesome. Thank you so much, Chelsea, for talking today. It was great to be able to hear that. Okay, our next speaker is going to be, our next author, sorry, is going to be Hal Reichardt. Reichardt.
Yeah, like cart right backwards.
Got it. It's neat because Hal, I think I saw you a couple months ago speaking.
Last summer,
and
from another book.
Yeah, you're a busy guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's fantastic. Let's talk about Hal for a little bit. He's the author of 20 humorous essays published in the Oregonian and the Portland Tribune, and an article published in Pioneer magazine. Hal independently published 2 collections of humorous essays, Whimsy Street, Humorous Excursions from Daily Life, and Kids, Dogs, Canaries, and Other Curiosities. Hal is also the author of a debut novel entitled The Matinee Caddy, which is over here tonight, and 3 poetry chapbooks. Hal's latest book is a spiritual adventure story tentatively titled Fairlane to Forever. He is currently searching for a literary agent, sorry. Hal lives in Beaverton, Oregon, and his wife Shannon and his canary named Sherman. Hal and Shannon raised 2 great kids, Connor and Lindsay, right here in Beaverton. You can keep up with Hal's whimsical sense of humor on his blog at God Loves to Laugh.
Correct.
Apparently. .com. There it is. Hal, come on up.
Good evening. I'd like to thank Primrose and Tumbleweed, Niwa, Jacobson Books, and everyone involved in the Bards and Brew program for having me here tonight. It's a joy to be here with you. So I heard a question about, writing and where does it come from? Does it come from your own experience? So maybe I'll address that right up front. I wrote this book a long time ago, and it was based on my experiences growing up in the North Shore of Long Island. Summers and weekends I caddied at a ritzy country club, and it was a big part of my formative experience for me growing up. And I ended up writing a book partly based on those experiences. I think I'm going to read to you the marketing blurb on the back here first because I put so much effort into it. It has to pay off. And then I'll read some selections from different chapters so you can get a feel for the arc of the story, the characters, and dialogue, and kind of my writing style. So here we go. The Matinee Caddy. Miles Walker never figured he would end up back at the caddy yard, not after scraping through college and clawing his way to success at Fourth National Bank. But riding high in the big city and the world of high finance would come at a price that might include the love of his life. With a ravishing old flame as his best friend and confidant, Miles is forced to come to terms with his past and the longings of his heart, as he struggles to find the courage to reveal his deep feelings to the beautiful Beth at work. Meanwhile, Miles is drawn into a battle for his very soul with an unscrupulous boss and the worldwide financial empire he represents. A curious cat named Headlight and an old friend at the caddy yard help show the way as Miles readies himself for the fight of his life. We'll start with one of the early chapters. Our hero, Miles Walker, has just had a big fight with his boss. He's upset and he calls his best friend, Lori Dunbar. She's an ex-girlfriend and now his best friend. By noontime, Miles had taken care of some administrative paperwork like filling out his timesheet for the previous week and was eager to meet his friend. He was on his way out of the building and headed for the Mexican sandwich shop when he spotted Arch stepping out with Beth Winnis. Okay, Arch is his boss. He's the bad guy in this story. Beth Winnis is the girl he's secretly in love with. He hasn't told her yet, but he's been in love with her for years. And she's going out with his boss. So you've got a triangle right from the get-go. We've got a problem, right? Miles was far enough behind them so that he was sure they didn't see him. Beth was walking close to Arch's side, and her long brown hair was bobbing up and down in harmony with her stride. She had on a colorful flowered pink dress that was appropriate for a bright summer day such as this, and seemed enthralled to be out with Arch. Miles watched her mesmerizing legs until the pair turned a corner and then redirected himself to his own lunch date. Laurie was sitting by the fountain in an expansive plaza situated in the middle of several skyscrapers on the eastern edge of downtown New Gladstone. New Gladstone is a fictionalized big city on the west coast of New York, the United States. Ferry Plaza was a popular lunchtime spot for the multitude of office workers who streamed into the city each day to keep the gears of the modern economy turning. Miles was no more than a minute or two late and glad to see his friend. Laurie looked fabulous, as usual. She was wearing a white skirt, slid up the side to reveal a hint of her alluring thighs as she perched on a stone wall by the ferry fountain, amid a throng of office workers. Her blonde hair was pulled back on one side in a clasp, instead of her usual ponytail, and she had a casually tied silk kerchief draped around her bright blue blouse. Laurie slid over a bit on the wall to make room for Miles as he approached. "Hello, handsome. What's all the urgency about?" Miles sat down next to Laurie and leaned over to kiss her on the cheek. She pinched his side playfully and paused to hear his response. Small beads of perspiration already beginning to form on her freckled brow from the midday sun. "Well, Arch called me in this morning for a new assignment, and I've got a bad feeling about it." "What is it?" said Laurie. "I'm not going to tell you." Gotta read it. A little later in the story, Miles goes home. He's really upset, and he goes home to see his parents and just get a break from the big city. And he decides to go up to the caddy yard, see some old friends. He ends up getting pressed into service. The caddy master is short and sends him out on a loop. And lo and behold, guess who he meets? "Are you golfing, Miles?" Beth smiled and sipped her drink as Miles stopped short, surprised. He pulled the bags off his shoulders and swung them up on their bases, locking his elbows and leaning in nonchalantly, even though his heart was racing at the sight of Beth in her tennis whites, her brown hair pulled back beneath the visor and beads of perspiration simmering on her legs. "I'm caddying today," said Miles. He hadn't expected to run into Beth, especially not at Piping Black Country Club. Seeing her now, fanning herself with a coaster on the other side of that invisible abyss, threw him into a momentary confusion. This was supposed to be a relaxing weekend away from his troubles, a short touchstone odyssey to backfill his perspective and refresh his soul. Instead, he was now faced with an update on his inability to escape his humble beginnings. "I never expected to see you today," said Miles. "I used to caddy here when I was a kid, and the caddy master was short this weekend, so I came over to help and see some old friends. I didn't know you were a member." Beth let the coaster drop from her outstretched hand onto the table. "I'm not a member," she said. "Miles would like to meet Penny. I'm her guest today. Penny's family belongs to the club. We just played a set of tennis." Miles turned and smiled at Penny, who sat snugly in an ornate iron lawn chair, her moist auburn hair tied back unpretentiously in the manner of the very rich. "Penny and I were on the majorettes together in high school," said Beth. "We almost never get a chance to catch up with each other these days, so this is a real treat." Penny fidgeted. "Yes, it is, and so nice to meet you, Miles. But look, Beth, there's Elsa and Debbie. Let's see if they're up for some doubles." Beth looked apologetically at Miles and caught herself staring at his muscular arms as he pulled the bags back onto his shoulders. There was something disarmingly attractive about Miles, she thought, especially when he was wearing blue jeans and a t-shirt, instead of the three-piece suits and silk ties she had grown accustomed to seeing him in around the office. Why hadn't she noticed his blue eyes before? "Well, I better get going," said Miles. "Nice to meet you, Penny." Now we'll skip ahead. Beth and Penny are in the car driving home from the country club in a chapter called A Summer Storm. "Beth, who was that caddy you were talking to? I mean, he was cute, but really?" Penny had the car purring eastbound towards Lorinda. Beth turned towards her friend and rested her elbow on the back of the front seat, tossing her hair back out of the way in the same motion. "I don't know," she said. "He's a guy from the office. I think he's a systems analyst or something. I know he works for Arch." "Not the same Arch?" Penny gasped, leaving the thought unfinished. Beth squirmed in her seat, still smarting from Arch's failure to call her that morning. She wondered if he had tried to reach her later in the day. She already knew she would check her answering machine when she got home before doing anything else. "Beth, are you listening?" said Penny. "This caddy you were gaping at works for Arch?" Why does he carry golf bags on the weekend if he has a real job? Look, his name is Miles Walker, said Beth. I did introduce him, but you were too preoccupied with Elsa and Debbie to pay attention. Well, excuse me. Elsa and Debbie are two of my best friends, said Penny. You don't expect me to give my full attention to a caddy, do you? Beth moped in her seat without answering as the first drops of a summer thunderstorm began to splay out in a light pattern on the windshield of the car. They drove in silence for several miles as a storm gathered. Penny turned the wipers on to squeak and thump the water away from view. Beth was first to break the uneasy spell. I'm sorry, Penny, she said. This thing with Arch has got me on edge. I don't know what possessed me to get involved with a married man. It's not like I haven't had plenty of chances with perfectly eligible guys. It's like being on a carousel that looks so magical before you get on, but quickly turns into a nightmare, and you can't stop spinning. Now we'll skip ahead to big companies in the city always have a country party, right? So they have one at Miles's place of employment too. It's a big bank called Fort National Bank. So they have a big party at the top of a really cool hotel in downtown with Gladstone. And Beth arrives at the party early, and Miles sees her and makes his way over there. She stood listlessly in the southwest corner of the room, her face mutely reflecting the last lights of a salmon red sunset. Outside the window lay a tired metropolis, slowing down like molasses as the heat waned and the brick, stone, and steel that had glistened and baked moments earlier now contracted. Around her, a few of the other early arrivals took readings on the locations of the hors d'oeuvres and the exits, moving ponderously in the frenzied paths of the caterers. Miles walked towards her slowly. They were in the interstices, the space between acts when the player's rules didn't apply. The party hadn't started yet. It would be a while before the cavernous room filled with glitter toads on heels dancing clumsily around management scouts. Hours yet before young hamsters would spin their futility wheels for their owners like runaways enlisted by an evil circus. But only moments before Beth's long brown hair would glow radiantly in the dying sun's final gasp of brilliance as the other side of the world usurped power again. It's early yet, Beth, said Miles. Time to reflect before the evening begins? Miles moved closer and looked into the distance to see what was drawing Beth's gaze. Beth acknowledged Miles's presence without turning her body. I don't mean to look so glum, Miles. I've been looking forward to this party all week. I thought about you, you know, after we met at the country club last weekend. Beth turned her face up towards Miles, flinty sparks of sun still glistening in her eyes. Miles looked at her intently, as if he were seeing an almost forgotten friend who moved away one day in early childhood, returned to him mysteriously at a time when he most needed to recall the special secrets they once shared. Not as much as I've thought of you. I love you, Beth. I have for years. So Miles finally spilled the beans. He told Beth he loves her. I'm not going to tell you what happens. Later in the story, one of the great things about caddying is you get to play golf for free. And at a really nice country club. And they usually let you go out late in the day, usually on a Monday when the members aren't there. And they say, all right, caddies, go. Have your fun out there. And so Miles has been back at the caddy yard for a while now. And he's got a match set up with Sammy O. And Sammy O is a mythical figure. He's the caddy of all caddies. Everyone loves him. He always gets the best moves, the best, you know, he's just regal in caddy culture. And he's the best golfer, too. And so Miles is flattered that Samuel wants to play golf with him. And so they're up there, they're going to play golf. This chapter is called After 4. 4 o'clock at the club, and the already slow pace of a Monday afternoon had eased even further. Down on the range, Newton Sumters worked alone, hitting wedge shot after wedge shot out into the field with subtle precision and grace. 100 yards farther out, a young single caddy ran a few paces in either direction to shag the golf balls the pro hit, shading his eyes from the low-angling afternoon sun to avoid being hit by one of the balls. Bob Lloyd stood in the portal of his shack, leaning his elbows on the counter and looking down thoughtfully towards the driving range in the front nine. In the distance, he could see the fairway sprinklers sending up their plumes of water out onto the 6th fairway. Beside his elbow rested a small book he used to record the names of the caddies he had authorized to play that evening. As the hopefuls arrived, Bob would check them off in his record book and write out their names on a pass that he signed in a familiar scrawl before letting them out on the course. Bob seemed to relax more on a Monday evening when few of the members were around, but took occasion when necessary to shoo the caddies away from the blue championship tees and down to the whites. Bob looked on while one of the houseboys drew a funny wooden peg rake over the blue gravel around the shack in the pro shop, evening it out for another day of activity. So the match starts, and they're having a good match, and it's interrupted when they get to the fifth hole. Suddenly, Gertzen, who's the greenskeeper, comes riding down the fairway with someone in the golf cart with him, and it looks kind of familiar. Miles isn't sure who. It turns out to be Lori Dunbar, his best friend from the city. Never expected to see her there, and she has some unwelcome news. But Miles is really into this match with Sammy O, and he says, all right, we can deal with this later. If you want to hang out with us for the rest of the match. And so Lori says, sure, we'll do that. So they keep going through the match, and now I'll pick it up on the 17th hole with this last segment. Miles got one more birdie on the short par 3 17th hole to earn another star and cut into Sammy O's winnings on the Nassau bet. But by the time they got to the 18th tee, the sky had taken on that royal blue and purplish hue that proceeded to plunge into full darkness. From the tee on the long par 5 finishing hole, they could just make out the blurred outlines in front of the clubhouse, which sat at the top of a large turning circle on the other side of the 18th green. The quiet afternoon had already been broached by the clicking of a few summer crickets, eager to announce the change from day to night. There was still an orange glow on the western horizon, and the mystical sense of being between two worlds. Look, said Lori, pointing up to her right from the tee, you can already see the moon. They all lifted their heads to gaze at the pale, translucent outline of the moon in the twilight sky above them, before Miles stepped up to hit his tee shot. He hit it solidly, but none of them could tell whether it landed in the fairway or in the rough. It takes a real caddy to track the ball at twilight, said Sammy O as he teed up. You have to use your instincts. Then Sammy O spun his own shot high into the sky, while the unlikely threesome remained motionless on the tee, straining their ears to hear the ball drop to earth, farther out on the darkening fairway. So, thank you. Should I stay out here for questions, or?
Yeah, Hal, what's your handicap?
18.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's been a while.
Nice.
It's not a legit handicap anymore.
What
year is that?
Okay, I'll
It used to be.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.